we are bringing back required viewing. And what required viewing kind of is or was back in, we did a few shows of this back on the radio show back a few years ago. And I came up with the idea. I used to do a blog series called Required Viewing, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to transition it to radio. Sleepless with Steve, at least in the sense, too, that like when there's a down weekend or a down week of movies, it's good to kind of look back at some classics. Basically what required viewing means, at least how we kind of outlined it, is it's a 4-star film that you must see. This is a movie that's important to the history of film. And we also abide by a 20-year rule where a movie has to be at least 20 years old. And Back to the Future, it's really fitting that we did this, and it makes sense why it's on Netflix, because Back to the Future is 35 years old. Jesus Christ.
Damn.
35 years old. That movie, is it now officially old enough to run for president? Like why?
So
it's pretty astonishing. But we're going to talk about Back to the Future for a little while, because I'm interested to hear what you guys thought of it again, seeing it. When was the last time you saw it, Dominic? When was the last time you saw Back to the Future?
Oh, good
Before
God.
This week.
I used to watch that movie, caught it on some movie, channel on TV, and it was always like in the middle onwards. I like almost no. I had obviously seen the beginning before, so the last time I had watched it, like actually sat down to watch it, I have no freaking clue, man. Because it's something that we all just grew up with. It's an American classic. It's like, a lot of people call it like the perfect movie, which we'll echo today probably as well. And yeah, I really cannot, because I remember watching it since the beginning of time and just over many different viewings. It's kind of like Star Wars, where I had never actually watched Star Wars from 0 seconds to the credits until like, oh, hey, like I should probably watch this as an actual film as opposed to just something that's always there.
Yeah, I get that too. Joe, when's the last time you caught Back to the Future before this week?
Man, I like Dom as well. I used to watch it all the time when I was younger because for some reason I just remember seeing it always on TV, either when it was TBS or something. But I remember originally it came on Netflix at one point before, like recently. And that's when I watched it. I don't know how far back that was. I know it was a few years ago, but when it came back onto Netflix, or for the very first time, I think on Netflix, I was like, you know what? I haven't seen this in a long time. Let me rewatch it. So like maybe, I don't know, like 4 years ago was the last time I saw this movie.
Yeah, it had to be for me at least 10 years. I mean, I never reviewed it, honestly. I've never reviewed it. I've actually, too, this might surprise people, I never watched the sequels. I'm going to in the next couple of weeks, but I've never seen the sequels.
Really? I'm the only one who's watched the sequels?
You watched the third one? You watched the Western?
So I'm guessing then all the jokes in 2015 when it's like, hey, it's 2015, it's like Back to the Future, like none of that connected with you at all.
I know about them, like what was it? The self-lacing Nike shoes, Pepsi. Yeah. I know the hoverboards. Yes.
In that movie as well, wasn't that one thing?
I think it wasn't it, Dom? You're our resident Back to the Future expert.
What was the question again? Sorry.
Did the Chicago Cubs win like the World Series?
Yes, yes, they did. So that was the joke because the Cubs were in World Series contention in 2015, but then they lost.
Yeah.
Like they so usually did, but then they won the next year. That was like a week before the election in 2016. So then like immediately that. But anyway,
it sucked the. I mean, we live in Illinois. It sucked the air out of this state after a 108-year drought. Like I remember people saying I would trade a Cubs win for this, but we ain't gonna talk about that. That's neither here nor there. I did get though my stimulus check this week. Shout out Daddy Trump. Anyway, so what was with Back to the Future 2? One last thing. What was the Pepsi in that? Because I remember they came out with a limited edition Pepsi of all things. What was the special thing about that Pepsi in that movie? I don't remember what it was.
Pepsi free? No.
Pepsi free. Yeah.
Pepsi perfect. Pepsi perfect. It's Pepsi perfect. Which even at the time sounded like that. God, that totally sounds like something any soda would do. Pepsi perfect.
Because Pepsi did wind up coming out with limited edition bottles, and predictably they sold out in like 2 minutes, and Jagoff's price gouged them from here on out. But I do remember them releasing those along with like some self-lacing Nike shoes. which I would still buy, honestly. I would buy those. But anyway, talking about the first film, Back to the Future from 1985, we're not going to do a plot recap on it. You know the plot. It's not really worth our breath to talk about it. I guess we'll just start, again, where we always do, with general thoughts. Joe, why don't you start with kind of your general thoughts, rewatching Back to the Future. What connected with you? Did you realize anything, now that you're a little bit older and stuff like that? What really stood out to you on this rewatch?
I mean, okay, like after now, like seeing so many movies now and just kind of like, understanding more what film was. Because the last time I saw this film, I didn't take a film class. I didn't take anything. I was like, looking at film a different way because I used to listen to a ton of podcasts that did movie reviews and all this other stuff. But God, I mean, looking at this movie now, like I'm trying to think, has there been anything like just this much fun of an adventure movie in such a long time like this? Like I really loved the whole story of Marty going back in time and like he meets his father and his mother. He almost falls in love with his mother. And it's just like, how like funny and just how iconic it is too. I mean, just you have Doc Brown, like there's just all these cool things they have in this movie that like, yeah, I mean, at the time, did they know it was going to be iconic? Probably not. But I mean, there's just something so creative about it that it's just like, damn, I would love to see an adventure family film like this again today. And I'm just trying to think, I mean, like, unless if it's not animated, I'm really trying to think, when's the last time we had something this big, really?
I would say, in my opinion, and I'm not going to say like this movie is as good as Back to the Future by any means, but I will remember, it was a movie, and you guys might disagree, because it still gets talked about a little bit, but a movie that I remember seeing in theaters, I was still fairly young. I was like, high school age and stuff. And I remember seeing it. I just remember really being enthralled by it. I haven't seen it since. Was Super 8. Honestly.
Yeah.
Clearly it's iconic. You two had to take a second. Yeah, clearly it's iconic and had a lasting impact. I mean,
no. But you got a point. You got a point.
Yeah, no.
That movie. I don't know, like, I just watched that movie, and it was like, I mean, yeah, it's kind of, it works as like Spielberg was a producer on that. It's a very Spielberg-like movie. I know J.J. Abrams directed it, but you could kind of tell Spielberg was kind of whispering in his ear, I think you should do it this way. Yeah. You know what I mean? It had that Spielberg flair. Yeah. But, like, Super 8, though, I remember seeing it in the theater with a packed house, and I remember thinking, like, damn, this movie is great. I got sucked in. I gave it a perfect 4-star review. I don't know what I'd think of it now, but I remember that movie, and I remember people around my age, we all liked it a lot. Yeah. We talked about it a lot. It was kind of like, now that I think about it, it was kind of like, in a way, without minus the killer clown and the dirty words, it was kind of like It for kids.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
That's always
like
what I
Stranger Things.
Yeah, I always said like it was either the Super 8 or Stranger Things, but rated R.
Pretty much. But yeah, to quote the Greg Kinn Band, they really don't write them like that anymore. Dom, your general thoughts though, rewatching Back to the Future.
Yeah, what really struck me was just how awesome like the first act of that movie is, and obviously the rest of it too. But again, I have a special angle on that because I had always watched it from the middle onward, so all the cool parts. But no, that beginning, like how it sets everything up. Back to the Future is the ultimate like, I need to rewatch this movie, not just because it's good, but because of all the details they cram in there. I'm pretty sure Back to the Future comprises like the top 10 posts on r/movie details, which is a subreddit where they just talk about movie details. And I like it, but regardless, it's fun. The Huey Lewis soundtrack just is pinpoint perfect for that movie. And I love Huey Lewis and the News, which is like the most milquetoast opinion you can have in terms of music. So how I went from there to like jazz, I don't know. But anyway,
not to interrupt you there, but here's the thing: as a diehard Eagles fan, I'll raise you milquetoast music opinions. Okay,
the Eagles,
music taste.
The
Eagles.
The Eagles had Hotel California, which is like dark and brooding, whatever. Like, and then like, but Huey Lewis had Hip to Be Square, so I don't know. Just all the details that come with it just build up to something absolutely fantastic, and it's just so relatable. Marty McFly is true. I mean, it also helps that Michael J. Fox didn't really do much anything substantial on the level of Back to the Future after the movie was filmed, obviously because of his Parkinson's. But Michael J. Fox just encapsulates that perfect teenage. That feeling. Maybe he's not the youngest looking kid like a Tom Holland is in his Spider-Man movies, but man, he encapsulates that feeling so perfectly for me. And
I agree. He's got that heartthrob quality too, but he's also got he's got the heartthrob quality for the girls, but he's got the cool almost like Bart Simpson sort of aesthetic for the boys. And I was even reading too. I was reading a little bit of literature on this movie, and I'll have a couple opinions too. But they were even saying too how this movie really helped influence skateboard culture. You got to think This was 1985, and this was really not a big thing in that movie. But it kind of paved the way inadvertently almost for the skateboard culture that was huge in the 90s. I mean, enormous. I remember even during when we were growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, man, people had the DC shoes. I was never cool. I couldn't rock those meaningfully. But everybody had that Tony Hawk, the skater games. That movie, I didn't really put my finger on it, but I'm I guess Marty McFly kind of did. Yeah. Pave the way for that with him, his skateboard and his life preserver and everything.
Thanks to him, a lot of producers were like, "You know what? Give this character a skateboard to appeal to the kids."
Yeah. He won over the marketing troop on that one. I will say my biggest takeaway from rewatching Back to the Future has to be, I love how elegantly written it is. And let me explain that. The first act of this movie is tremendous. And the reason why is that even all these asides in the first act that you think don't mean anything, they're almost like needless exposition. They contribute to the meaning of stuff that happens then when Marty goes back in time to 1985. The best example I could think of in the movie is the early dinner table conversation Marty has with his parents when they're rehashing about Uncle Dennis, and they're talking about how Marty's father, George, was hit by a car, and that's how Lorraine, his mother, met George. And then how that comes into play when he goes back in time, and how, Marty then gets hit by the car when he's back in time, and then you start putting two and two together. The movie actually has some faith in, the audience in terms of, it foreshadows things. Yeah. And that's the thing that I really took away from this. I'm this movie so elegantly builds forward.
It's efficient.
And is so forward-thinking. Mm-hmm.
It's got that
100%.
It's got that same thing that when you rewatch this movie, there's so much you're gonna pick up the second time around. It's like Get Out. It's like every other Hot Fuzz, all of Edgar Wright's films basically. Is that there's so much happening the first time you watch it that the second time around you're gonna catch every little detail, every little Easter egg that they're setting up at the start of this movie.
Yes, and going forward too with Back to the Future. It's really remarkable too, the performances. I think the performances are really lively, and it's not a case of you see this a lot where the characters or the actors are trying to have a ton of energy in order to almost offset a poor script. These actors play along really well. Crispin Glover, I forgot how good he was in this movie. How believably dorky he is, and how it's almost like a contradiction, but how believably dorky he is. And Michael J. Fox, how he exudes coolness, and how Christopher Lloyd just so effortlessly plays Doc Brown. Go ahead, Dom.
I was just going to say that, Marty McFly, he does exude that cool, no doubt. But he also, and kudos to Michael J. Fox for portraying this, that he does show enough cracks on that coolness, and he has that nerdy quality that he inherits from his father. That again just makes him one of the most relatable characters of all time. That every kid can put themselves in Marty McFly's shoes. Just either it's the dreamer aspect, the creative slacker, the kind of the cool slacker, but he's got a heart of gold kind of thing. So it's awesome, man. And if I think Biff Tannen or Michael Wilson is just the ultimate. His character should roll eyes. And it should be so over the top. I think he's the most over the top character, possibly even more so than Doc Brown. Because it also helps that Doc Brown has an arc as opposed to Biff is just freaking Biff all three movies. But he's just so damn good, and he also I think he became like a kind of a comedian afterwards. He's like a singer comedian, and he's got some stuff you can watch on YouTube as well. But man, this whole cast is just perfect. So yeah,
they are. I really too. I also liked Leah Thompson. I thought Leah Thompson was better than I remembered too. She plays along really well, and I just want to say this too. For a movie about going back in time, it also has kind of like the least sexy premise in a way too, at least from Marty McFly's standpoint. And it's not a critique by any means. I just find this funny. This was like the underlying humor of the whole movie for me, is that like, I know it's his mother. The whole thing is touchy. They're dancing around at the whole, or you know what I mean. He's trying to avoid that the whole time. But it's like Marty McFly goes back in time, and to the 50s, and he's got this woman who's like clearly infatuated with him, but his whole goal now, he's got to spend his time after doing this revolutionary, transformative, life-changing experience of winding up going back in time. No, he's got to make his father less of a dork. And it's the least sexy premise, but it's almost like that down-to-earth quality within the movie. It's not like he's going back to stop, you know what I mean, a bombing or a natural disaster or some sort of unforeseeable circumstance, during that time. He's going back to he goes back accidentally, and then he has to right the wrong, risking the butterfly effect, I guess you could say.
I think that's what makes this movie so much fun too, and what makes me go like, damn, we haven't really had something like this. It's because it isn't about Marty going back in time to stop, I don't know, Hitler or something. Like, it's just like he's going back in time by accident because he was escaping from terrorists. And it's just like now he's stuck here, and in order to make sure he doesn't disappear, he has to help his dad get laid. It's such a bizarre plot, but it's fun. It's just so much fun. And like you're saying, it's down to earth. It's something truly original. I can't really think of a film that comes as close to a plot line as Back to the Future, especially with time travel. I mean, this movie is the thing that a lot of people refer to when it comes to time travel. It's either this or I don't know, Time Cop. I can't even think of other.
There's not been many award-winning time travel movies, but that's the elegance too of writer-director Robert Zemeckis, who, in my opinion, I want to mention him before we kind of move forward in a few minutes, who doesn't get the credit he deserves, and Bob Gale, the two writers of this too. They downplay maybe the little bit of an icky angle of the premise, and they make it comedic. They make it lighthearted. It works effortlessly. It's hilarious, and I even too, I appreciate the timing of this movie, the comic timing at least. These characters work so well off of one another, even in every stage. Leah Thompson and Michael J. Fox's character, Christopher Lloyd, Michael J. Fox, they all work super well off of each other.
Fun fact, I believe in the behind the scenes, Back to the Future was supposed to be a Disney movie, or it was in talks to be a Disney produced movie. However, they were immediately caught off guard by the mom falling in love with her son plot line, which when you say it out loud, it sounds like freaking weird. And it's like, yeah, I kind of get why Disney kind of recoiled at that. But that's how it wound up becoming I think a Paramount produced movie. And yeah, you totally nailed it, because the comedic timing is just perfect, that you can just completely gloss over this really weird aspect. And my God, Doc Brown. Honestly, I think Doc Brown has got to be one of the greatest all-time, obviously, scientist characters. That's undisputed, probably. But even one of my favorite father figure roles, or just a guiding mentor kind of thing, which you don't immediately associate with Back to the Future. But Doc Brown really, he encapsulates everything that everyone wants out of a friend, right? He is always just faithfully loyal, always trying to think of a way out of the situation. Just got all these quirks that make him, that make him weird, but in a good, unique way. He's a mentor, but also a really close confidant at the same time. And you don't really think about that because Another thing I noticed while watching the exposition for Back to the Future, rewatching, really going into that first act, is that you don't really need to know the deep backstory on how these guys met, Doc and Marty, or how, all their trials and tribulations, or why they're such good friends to begin with. It's just established, and through the story, it somehow becomes one of the greatest relationships ever in film. Yeah. And I'll just finish by saying that that's really an accomplishment, considering that so much of the movie banks on the fact that one of the characters goes back in time, and you're kind of reevaluating that friendship from a weird genesis, from a really unique perspective, where one person knows this relationship really well and the other person just met them. And that's just a really good accomplishment in the writing and the mechanics of the film.
Exceptionally said right there. It's true. He's a guiding figure for Marty. He's a mentor, and he's ultimately a friend. Like, he's somebody that Marty can confide into. And like, even the opening intro, just that's going through all of Doc Brown's crazy, gizmos, doodads, whatever you want to call them. I just want an excuse to say doodads. But like, he's going through everything, and then how they like wind up like having that phone conversation initially and stuff. It's just established perfectly. Like, you really get that. You don't need to know the origin story of how the two met or how they came to work for each other. You know what I mean? And
shout out to I think it is Robert Zemeckis, who holds the franchise so tight to his chest that he will never, as long as he is alive, I think he's quoted as saying this somewhere, as long as he is alive, no studio or anyone will ever reboot this story ever again. Yeah. And thank God for him.
It's a film that doesn't need, at least this first one. I haven't seen the trilogy, so I can't speak of that, but this first one never needs to be remade. What about it, like, can you really do better?
It's a losing strategy.
No. Like, you could forgive the special effects. You might be like, well, they're outdated special effects, they can update that. You could forgive that because of how good the writing is, how great the characters are, just how great everything else is about this movie. That, like, I could just be like, yeah, you know what, it was made in the 80s, and I can let that go because everything else about this is fantastic.
Yeah, you don't need a remake. You don't need a remake on that one. Go ahead, Dom.
And I know we're kind of straying away from the actual film itself and more towards just Back to the Future as a phenomenon, but don't get me wrong, it has been franchised with 2 sequels, a whole bunch of merchandising and all that stuff, but not quite as much as you think it would be compared to at least what we experienced in the past 20 years, right? With all the franchises we have going around us right now. I think I'm kind of going through a list of things in the Back to the Future franchise. There was an animated series, I think, that was like whatever. I never even saw an episode. There was a video game series that served as a sequel.
Yep.
Where they hired an amazing, the voice from Marty McFly was an amazing sound-alike, and then they actually just brought on Christopher Lloyd straight up to voice Doc Brown again. And I heard that was good. It was decent.
That's the Telltale game, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So usually they have good stories. Usually.
I heard that was pretty good. I do remember that. I do remember hearing that was pretty solid. Yeah, it hasn't been licensed though as much as you would think.
And then stage musical. A stage musical, which I believe did debut in March of this year, and it ran for like 2 weeks, but then everything got shut down because the world shut down. So that really sucks.
I'd still rather see a stage musical. Sorry to interrupt you. I'd still rather see a stage musical than a remake.
Yes, absolutely. And it's kind of amazing too how no one has thought. I mean, I'm sure people have tried, and Robert Zemeckis just like has made them disappear. But I'm sure that I'm surprised that we haven't really gotten a kind of a prologue. Delving deep into the Doc and Marty relationship, but at the same time, no, I don't want to see that. I don't at all. I don't need to see this.
Don't plant the seed. Plant the seed on that one. It's a tremendous film. It truly is, and it's a special movie too. Because if you watch something like that. I watched it Monday night, and it's like they really don't write them like that anymore. They really don't. And I know nostalgia can kind of cloud your mind too. But even I think if you were to show like a teenager this movie now, somebody who's not into movies, somebody even a younger kid not into movies, I think he or she would really like it. You know what I mean? Just on its own. Forget the nostalgia. Like if you knew nothing about the history of this movie. I think you would enjoy it thoroughly. And Robert Zemeckis, too. I just want to almost end. I'll probably give Joe the final word, too, on Back to the Future after this. But, I mean, there needs to be more Robert Zemeckis appreciation. There really does. This is a man who's directed amazing films in his day. I mean, Forrest Gump, Castaway, Polar Express. I mean, even his more recent movies, Flight. Yeah. Another great movie. Flight, The Walk with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which I was really upset when that movie didn't do well. Robert Zemeckis is truly a phenomenal visionaire.
Did you say Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? I didn't even mention that.
That's like his second best movie out of my, again, limited knowledge of Robert Zemeckis. But Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a technical achievement, even more so than Back to the Future, in my opinion. And like, it dunks on Space Jam hard in terms of that. In terms of that live action animation, yeah, kind of thing. So yeah, but yeah, sorry to cut you off.
In a time when there's all this Michael Jordan praising and worshiping due to The Last Dance airing, here's this guy. Oh, this movie, Roger Rabbit dunked on Space Jam. No, I just like that. But no, I love Zemeckis. I've liked Zemeckis for years, probably ever since the Polar Express. I've really kept an eye on him. And I mean, even to this day, he's done really well. I mean, one of his only missteps had to be that god-awful Mars Needs Moms, which I believe was his production company. I don't know if he directed that. I think it was his production company, though, that did that. I'm pretty sure, because I think that's what got it shut down, because he was going to make the Beatles Yellow Submarine movie. Like, he was going to remake that of some capacity, and it never wound up happening because Mars Needs Moms sucked so hard. Financially and just as a movie in its own. Joe, you'll end it here because we do have to dive into this Amazon AMC subject. Closing thoughts on Back to the Future. Joe gets the final word.
It's a classic for a reason. Robert Zemeckis, he doesn't get enough credit as he does as a director. Hell, when I asked my parents, I'm like, man, what do you guys think of Back to the Future? Even so many years later, they talk about how they love Spielberg's Back to the Future, and I'm just like, oh, come on. I always feel like Spielberg just kind of got the credit for this movie more than Zemeckis ever did. But yeah, man, I mean, it's a classic with where it has no need to be replicated. It's perfect in every way. Like when Dom said it's a perfect film. I mean, if you nitpick it, probably you could find stuff that's wrong with it. But yeah, I love this movie. It's a fantastic film. It still holds up 35 years later. And in fact, now that I know 2 and 3 are on Netflix, it actually made me want to go and watch 2 and 3. Never had the intention to do it originally because I always just thought the first one's so amazing. I don't need to see a sequel, really. But I'm kind of itching to watch something now, so I might go on to this. But yeah,
that's how I feel. That's exactly how I felt. The same way with the sequels. I'm like, I know this can't be topped because if it did, I would hear about 2 and 3 as often as I hear about part 1. But at the same time, I'm approaching it with an open mind because it's not like these are notoriously. These movies are not. Here's the thing: these movies are not Caddyshack 2. You know what I mean? I get that. They have their own audience. This isn't Dumb and Dumberer. Yeah. You know what I mean? Back part 2 and part 3, they do have some love. They really do. I know there's a lot of apologists who have resurfaced the last couple of years for part 3.
Yeah.
A lot of people like that Western movie too. So I'll be interested. I'll be interested to revisit those. Maybe when I watch them or when you watch them, Joe will maybe lightly bring them up on the show.
I want to talk about them. I want to talk about them because this is so interesting.
Let's keep it in mind. Maybe next month I would not mind talking Back to the Future Part 2. Make it a little bit of a recurring thing. Maybe we'll talk about that after the show.